Hey there and welcome back. In today's video, we'll be going over the top 3 solo PvP builds in Albion Online. I'll go over what items to take, which abilities to use, and a quick rundown on how the build works. These builds do really well in the open world and in the mist. They provide damage, crowd control, and mobility. Now before we get into the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more Albion Online content, and make sure to join the growing Discord community where we house over 400 members from all regions, and I give away 30-day premium giveaways every 2 weeks. Now without further ado, let's get into the video. At number 3, I have the double-bladed staff. The double-bladed staff provides high mobility, and you can decide to use this to chase players down or kite while waiting for cooldowns. It provides a good amount of crowd control and damage. It's also good at completing objectives in the mist since it's hard to catch. Now let's get into the build. Now for your main hand, it will be the double-bladed staff. For your first ability, I do recommend Concussive Combo. Concussive Combo provides damage and crowd control. The way it works is that you'll combine up to 2 abilities, and if not, the combo itself will reset after 6 seconds. So the first and second is called the Flowing Blow. You'll land a flowing blow on the targeted enemy, dealing damage in a cone in front of you, so it's good to AoE against mobs as well. Now the third one is the Concussive Blow. When you land an overhand concussive blow on the target, it'll deal damage and stun them for about 2.5 seconds. So this is good to use for crowd control, or if you see that they're casting a certain ability that you want to go ahead and interrupt. Now your second ability, or your W, I do recommend Forceful Swing. This provides damage, crowd control, and it debuffs your enemy. So you'll go ahead and swing in a 6-meter radius, and you'll knock back anything in that 6-meter radius. Anything that is hit will have their damage decreased by 20% for 8 seconds. Also, any affected enemy player will be unable to do auto attacks. So this is huge against melee players because they'll kind of just sit there and not be able to auto attack you and wait for their abilities, especially if they're on cooldown. Now, if you do hit a mob with this, it'll go ahead and affect their auto attack speed by 50%. For your E, or your main ability, which is Soaring Swipe, that provides damage, crowd control, and mobility. So you'll leap towards a targeted position, dealing damage in a 6-meter radius, and also applying a slow to any enemy that you hit by 50% for about 4.5 seconds. Now for your passive, I recommend Stunning Strike. Every 10 auto attacks, you'll stun a targeted enemy. So if you're auto attacking somebody, you have a chance to interrupt one of their spells. It's a small stun, it only stuns for about half a second, but it's big enough to interrupt them. Now for your helmet, I do recommend the Cultist Cowl. The main ability that you're going to take for your Cultist Cowl is the Inner Corruption. So the Inner Corruption, pretty much the way it works is that you'll put this dot on your enemy. It'll activate after 0.2 seconds for 4 seconds. If the target is a player, it'll deal damage whenever they do auto attacks on you or use an ability, and it cannot be reflected. Now keep in mind, you don't want to use this after you use your weapon's W, which is the Forceful Swing, because they won't be able to auto attack. So make sure to time this properly where, let's say they can't auto attack for a bit, and then once they're ready to auto attack and use their abilities, you'll go ahead and pop this on them. As far as your passive, go with Aggression for the increased damage and healing by 3.5%. Now your armor piece is the Adept Stalker Jacket. So the Adept Stalker Jacket provides an electrical field around you for 6 meters, and it does a huge amount of damage for 5 seconds every half second. So pretty much you get about a total of 10 ticks. So you want to make sure that you pop this while you're on top of your enemy and you know that they can't run away. You've already slowed them down, applied your slows, stuns, and they're not able to run away. That's when you'll go ahead and get the maximum amount of damage. Now for your boots, I recommend any sort of cloth boots, but I like to use the Sandals of Purity for the Energetic Sprint, which increases your movement speed by 80% for 5 seconds and restores 13 energy every 1 second. Now, your passive for your boots is Aggression, which increases your damage and healing by 3.5%. For your cloak, you're going to go with the Avalonian Cape. The Avalonian Cape, the way it works is that you'll collect energy, and after 0.5 seconds, you'll unleash it and do damage to your enemy. You'll also reduce the damage the enemy does by 15% for 4 seconds. Now, as far as your food buff, for all your builds here today, you're going to be using the Beef Stew, which pretty much increases your damage by 13.5%. At number 2, I have the Light Crossbow. The Light Crossbow brings a lot of burst, cooldown reduction, and you'll be able to tie in your immunities and defensive abilities. You'll excel at poking your enemy, out-positioning them, and bursting them at the right time with your cooldowns and resets. Let's dive into the build. So for your Light Crossbow's first ability, I recommend Explosive Bolt. It'll fire an explosive bolt at the targeted position, dealing damage to all enemies in a 3-meter radius. Now, your W itself, your second ability, Caltrops provide damage, crowd control, and they buff you. You'll shoot a 2-meter radius trap on the ground. When your enemy walks through it, it'll go ahead and slow them for 30% for 4 seconds and deal damage. Now, it'll also increase your movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. So this is great to use. This allows you to kite your enemy kind of keep up with them, or you're going to be able to stay in range to go ahead and land more explosive bolts at them. You do throw this at your enemy's feet as far as in what direction that they're going to be going. Now your main ability is Exploding Shot. So Exploding Shot launches a sticky bomb at the targeted enemy that deals damage. Now after 2 seconds, the bomb itself explodes for a huge amount of damage in a radius. So this actually does damage to multiple targets, and it cannot be reflected. So you want to make sure that you pair this up with your other abilities so you can go ahead and get some burst out. Now your passive is pretty huge with the light crossbow, and it allows you to do a lot of burst damage. I recommend Well Prepared. So after every 4 spells cast, you reset the ability cooldown of your first slot ability. So that means that you'll get a reset on your explosive bolt. So you can go ahead and do like explosive bolt, you do your sticky explosive shot, get your cow traps out, then you'll explosive bolt again, and then it'll reset, you'll be able to explosive bolt again. So you'll get a lot of burst in a small window, doing a lot of damage. Now for your helmet's more on the defensive end, and it can be used for key moments. Your ability is Emergency Shield, which provides a shield on you that absorbs damage. Now depending on your enemy's health, if they're below 40%, it'll put on a bigger shield for you. If they're above 40%, it'll be a bit smaller. Now one of the cool things is that this also cleanses all damage over time effects. So let's say you're facing a cursed staff and they put their 4 stacks of vile curse on you and they're about to blow you up. You can pop this. It'll remove not only the 4 stacks, so now their bomb is going to be a lot less effective, but you'll have a shield to kind of absorb that bomb, allowing you to survive that attack. For the passive, I recommend Toughness, which increases your defense. Now for your armor piece, it's going to be the Cleric Robe. Since you're going with a cloth piece, you're going to do a lot more damage. You're going to go with Everlasting Spirit, which provides a ward on you after 1.5 seconds if you get hit. This makes you immune and increases your damage by 20%. So you want to make sure that you use this wisely, especially when you're going to do some burst. That way you can increase your damage by 20% and avoid getting interrupted or killed. Now your passive is Aggression. It increases all your damage and healing by 8%. For your cloak, I recommend the Martlock Cape. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to be a bit on the defensive side and you're going to have immunities. So the way this works is that when you drop below 25%, this shield will proc on you, which increases your defense against anybody by 50% for 5 seconds. Now your boots, I recommend the Soldier Boots. You'll take Rejuvenating Sprint, which increases your movement speed by 80% and provides you with some sort of sustain. As far as the passive on it, you'll take Toughness for the increased defense. Now since your light crossbow is a one-hander, for your offhand, I recommend taking Mistcaller. Mistcaller will help you with your cooldown rate. This build excels with cooldown reduction and allows you to get more bolts out and allows you to get more resets, increasing your damage. At number 1, I have the Bloodletter. Now, we haven't talked much about the Bloodletter on this channel since a lot of the builds that we work on are solo PvE oriented. However, the Bloodletter is a strong weapon since it provides you with a lot of damage, buffs, and mobility. The Bloodletter is used for gathering and transport for a reason. Its constant mobility is hard to keep up with and hard to run away from. This build is around slowing your enemy, controlling your enemy, avoiding attacks, and playing around your cooldowns. You'll get them low enough to quickly burst and finish them off. So for your Bloodletter, the first ability, I recommend taking Deadly Swipe. Deadly Swipe provides you damage, buffs, and mobility. You'll leap towards your target, dealing damage, and you can impact multiple targets at once. Hitting at least one enemy will also restore energy. For every enemy that you hit, you'll gain an Assassin Sprint charge, up to 3 stacks, which increases your damage by 6% for 8 seconds. This is a great ability to use to try to not only close the gap, but also provide damage. You can use it against mobs as you're chasing people down to keep your Assassin Spirit charges up. That way you don't drop your 3 stacks. Now, your second ability, you have 2 options. The main option I take is Dash, which provides you buffs and mobility. Dash will move you towards your targeted position, increasing all your damage by 15 seconds for 4 seconds. Now, if you find yourself fighting like a mage, like a frost mage, something with a lot of high mobility, and you want to make sure that you lock them down, you can try to take Shadow's Edge. This provides crowd control, buffs, and mobility. The way Shadow's Edge works is that you'll throw a knife, and if you land it, it'll go ahead and take you to that targeted position, making you kind of immune to damage or crowd control for a few seconds. Also, hitting a player with this will go ahead and lower the cooldown of this ability by 25%. So it's kind of on use depending on the enemy that you're fighting, but for the most part, I recommend keeping Dash. Now, your main ability, Lunging Stabs, does damage and mobility. It'll dash towards the targeted position, dealing physical damage to all your enemies that you pass through. Now, depending on how much health they have, you'll do a different amount of damage. So if they have above 40%, you'll do a lower amount of damage. But if they're below 40%, you'll do a huge amount of damage, almost twice the amount. So think about it kind of as an execute. So you kind of want to save this to get your enemy low. It does have a 26-second cooldown, so you kind of want to hold on to it. Unless you know that you're going to try to catch somebody or you're trying to run away, use it to kind of kite. You can do that as well. but I would definitely recommend trying to have this just in case you get them under that 40% mark. You can try to execute them. Also, if you hit at least one player below 40% health, it'll reduce the ability's cooldown by 40 seconds, meaning that 26 seconds will end up being about 15 or 18 seconds instead. For your passive, I recommend taking deep cuts. Every 4 auto attacks, you inflict a bleed on the target, just kind of increasing the damage over time on them. Now for your helmet, I recommend the Mercenary Hood. The reason why is for Howl. This provides damage, crowd control, and a debuff. So you'll do damage initially as you howl. It'll also slow your target by 35% for 6 seconds and decrease the damage dealt by 30% for 4 seconds. It also interrupts enemy spell casting. It's a very strong ability, especially as a bloodletter. You want to kind of stay on your target. You want to make sure that you're faster than them, that you can kite them, that you can interrupt them and do your damage and try to get that execute out. For your passive, I recommend Balanced Mind. Now, Balanced Mind increases all of your damage and healing by 1.5% and increases your defense. As far as your chest piece, I also recommend the Stalker Jacket. This allows you to do damage over time, over 5 seconds, every half second, so about 10 ticks. Like I mentioned before, you want to make sure that your enemy is slowed. You can hit them with that howl. Want to make sure that they're not able to get away from you. Pop this and you'll go ahead and maximize the damage output to them. I do recommend Quick Thinker for the cooldown reduction, since you want to make sure that you get a lot of your bloodletter abilities out. When it comes to your boots, I also recommend cloth boots. I go with the Sandals of Purity for the energetic sprint, which increases your movement speed by 80% for 5 seconds and restores 13 energy every second. You'll go with aggression with the increased damage and healing cast by 3.5%. For your offhand, I recommend the Torch. This gives you cooldown reduction, which is huge for your bloodletter. It also increases your auto attack speed, so you'll get a lot of auto attacks out, increasing your damage with your passives. For your cloak, I recommend the Avalonian Cape. This will also collect energy and deals damage in a 6-meter radius and reduces the amount of damage that the enemy does. Like I mentioned earlier, for all of these builds, you will go with the Beef Stew for the increased damage of 13.5%. Alright guys, I'm more than confident that you'll do well in PvP with any of these 3 builds. They are all unique, so test them out and see which style of gameplay you enjoy the most. Let me know in the comments which weapon you enjoyed the most, or if you have a different PvP weapon you like, make sure to let me know. Now, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to join the Discord community. Like always, stay epic, stay legendary, and I'll see you in the next one.